the #1 food that Russians eat to have such low levels of insulin resistance. It's wild, and maybe you've seen me talk about it before, but when you look at impaired glucose tolerance, basically how well people can handle carbohydrates, Russia ranks at the very top. They have tremendously low levels of glucose and pretty much very little, 3.5% levels of impaired glucose tolerance. Just as a matter of context, the United States is about 12%. So we've done videos talking about how interesting this is, but there's one particular interesting food that they consume that might be a huge contributor to it. It's something called Kasha, and we're going to talk about what is in it, but how you can incorporate this into your life. After today's video, another thing you can do to control blood sugar really well is consuming protein. I put a link down below for SunWarrior's protein. Now, this is a really cool active line protein that they have. Look, I consume meat, I consume dairy, I consume whey, but here and there, I sprinkle in plant-based protein powders to get a different context of protein. But more importantly, this is almost like a meal replacement that has other beneficial factors to it. So they've got pumpkin seed protein, but then they've also got digestive enzymes, they've also got probiotics in it, also has micronutrients in it. So it's not just same as just getting some whey protein. So SunWarrior's active line is literally going to be the best tasting plant-based protein powder you've ever had. It does not taste like some of these other ones. It's not gritty, it's ridiculously smooth. You can mix it with some fruit and make a smoothie out of it. They've got some crazy flavors. They even have a birthday cake flavor. They have vanilla, they have chocolate, you name it. These protein powders, as far as a plant-based protein powder are concerned, make it so you'd never want to have a different one ever again. And don't get me wrong, I still have the whey protein. I just have different contexts in which I use them. People ask me when I use plant-based versus when I use whey. Plant-based is a little bit more supplemental for me, whereas whey might be something that's a little bit more deliberate, right? Like deliberate after a workout. Now, if you're plant-based, use this one all the time, but just wanted to give context there. So the link down below saves you 20% off anything you want from SunWarrior. So check them out after this video and use that link to save 20% off. So Kasha, interestingly enough, this is one of the healthiest things that they probably consume in Russia. I have another one that we'll talk about as well, but it's essentially an oatmeal. But what's interesting is, if you've heard a lot of people, whether it's Paul Saladino, Dr. Gundry, even others that aren't as extreme, they still are a little bit bearish on oats. Simply because there's some weird kind of iffy things that kind of go on in how oats are manufactured. And although I do like my oatmeal now and then, I don't consume much of it for those reasons. Now, the Russians have this kasha, which is oatmeal made with buckwheat and also quinoa. Sometimes other things added in, sometimes they add fruits in, sometimes they add nuts in. Think of it like a hot muesli that's got a different consistency. The interesting thing is the evidence behind buckwheat is very strong. It's very low glycemic, and it seems to have a positive impact on blood sugar. But what's the most interesting is there's compounds that are in buckwheat that seem to increase the dephosphorylation of glycogen synthase, but also what is called pyruvate dehydrogenase. And I'm not honestly saying that to sound smart. For those of you that know biochemistry, you know what these do. I don't expect you to know that. The compounds that we're talking about, or the enzymes and the compounds that we're talking about in the body, these are required for glucose disposal. And the faster that they turn over, the faster you can get rid of glucose. So glucose disposal is not just getting rid of extra glucose. Glucose disposal means when you consume carbs, your body knows where to dispose of it, whether it's dispersing it to be used for fuel, dispersing it to be stored as muscle glycogen, i.e. glycogen synthase, or it knows to say, hey, like we gotta burn this now, right? So the more efficient your body can get at that, the better. And the interesting thing about buckwheat and quinoa actually seems to have similar compounds in it, the better. Now, another interesting thing that they eat, I know I said one thing, but they also eat a lot of pickled vegetables. Now, when you look at the literature on fermented foods, it's very, very clear. It's very clear that fermented foods impact our gut microbiome, and our gut microbiome directly impacts the short-chain fatty acids, which are the byproducts of bacteria feeding on fibers and feeding in the overall fermentation. These short-chain fatty acids then regulate how much glucose can go into a cell. They help more glucose go into a cell by helping glucose transporters. In very human terms, what this means is that your gut communicates with your cells to help them use fuels better. And it's a system that's been biologically designed to make sense. So when we eat food, the gut says, hey cells, get ready for what we've got. If we've got a healthy gut, that telephone line works better. If we don't have a healthy gut, it's like a static signal where they're trying to call and you're like, I don't quite hear what you're saying, gut. What is that? You're breaking up, you're breaking up. Okay, must have been nothing important. Here comes the sugar, right? Compared to, hey, sugar's coming. Okay, I'll get ready, I'll open the doors. That's the kind of thing that we want. So when you look at the fermented vegetable intake, it is a staple for Russians because it's cold a lot of the year and they can't get vegetables all year round. Now, don't get me wrong. The biggest thing that they probably do is they eat a lot of protein, plain and simple. But when you want these little things that you can add to your diet, let's talk about how you can do that. Okay, for one, a larger percentage of your overall diet coming from protein, whether it's going to be plant-based, animal-based, dairy-based, meat, fish, whatever. Increase that protein intake. That's step number one. Okay, I would encourage you to look up recipes for Kasha and have that instead of other carbohydrate sources for breakfast. If you want a carbohydrate source that you want to have with dinner and you're like, I don't know what else to have other than rice or something like that, look up recipes for Kasha. Our family has started swapping out buckwheat whenever we can. So if we're baking, you can't bake with straight buckwheat because it comes out kind of dense, but you can add it in, and the buckwheat has the compounds in it and the fiber in it to lower the glycemic value of whatever it is that you're eating. So you're baking cookies with the kids, use buckwheat. It's going to lower the glycemic index and it's going to slow down the absorption of the sugar if you did add sugar into it. Then the pickled vegetables. Now the evidence is suggesting that you need about 1/2 kilogram per month. That's not that much. I know it sounds like a lot because 1/2 kilogram is going to be like, I don't know, roughly 1.5 pounds of vegetables per month though. So divide that by 4. You've got what? 0.4-ish, a little under 0.4 pounds per week. Okay, you think about how much vegetables weigh, it's not that much, right? So you're talking about a serving per day. You're talking about maybe 1/2 cup, at most a cup of maybe sauerkraut, or maybe add some kimchi in, or pickled asparagus, or pickled okra. It's crazy because it's not just about the vegetables, it's about the pickling aspect itself. So adding these things in just daily or every other day, along with increasing your protein intake, those are huge, huge levers you can pull to be, well, I guess like the Russians, at least as far as their glucose is concerned. Maybe we want to adopt methods from other countries for other things, but as far as glucose, they are winning the race. I'll see you tomorrow.